As a child, my secret place was the attic of our old house, a dusty, dimly lit space that smelled of wood and forgotten stories. I loved sorting through boxes left by previous tenants, and one day I stumbled upon a small wooden chest. Inside, on a lining of faded velvet, lay a simple notebook with a hard, blue cover. A diary. I opened it, and a chill ran down my spine. The first entry was dated September 15th, my birthday. "Today I turned 14, the page read. My parents gave me the blue bicycle I'd been dreaming of. I spent the day riding with friends, and in the evening we had cake. It was a great day, just a little sad." Every word was true. The bicycle, the cake, even the unexplainable sadness I'd told no one about. I began to flip through the pages frantically, day after day. Each entry described my day in perfect detail. Every little thing, every secret thought. At first I thought it was some cruel joke. Maybe one of my parents was secretly watching me? But the handwriting was unfamiliar, and the details were too personal. For instance, it described how I tripped and fell behind the school when no one was watching, and how angry I was at myself for being so clumsy. No one could have known that. The next day, after school, I rushed to the attic. I opened the diary to today's date. The page was blank. I sighed in relief. I decided it was just a creepy coincidence. But the anxiety wouldn't leave. That evening, before bed, I went back up to the attic. My hands were trembling as I opened the diary, and I saw it. An entry. In neat, steady handwriting, the page described my entire day, right up to that very moment. It decided it was just a coincidence, but the anxiety wouldn't leave. He felt a sense of relief, but it was short-lived. From that night on, my life became a nightmare. I lived knowing that I was constantly being watched by invisible eyes that saw not only my actions, but my very soul. I became my own jailer. Before I did anything, I would think, how will this look in the entry? I tried to fight it. I tried to do things that were completely unpredictable, chaotic. One day, I spent an entire hour just sitting in my room, staring at the wall, not moving, trying to break the system. That evening, I found the entry in the diary. He tried to be unpredictable, but even his inaction is an action. He spent an hour looking at a crack in the wall that resembled a spider, a pathetic attempt. The diary wasn't just recording, it was mocking me. A week passed, then another. The horror became routine. I stopped fighting. I just lived, while my unseen biographer chronicled my empty life. I wondered, what would happen if the diary described my future? But the pages ahead were always blank. This thought became my only hope. As long as it was writing about the past, at least I was free in my future decisions. Or so I thought. Until yesterday. That evening, as usual, I took out the diary. It had grown noticeably thicker over the past few weeks. I opened it. Yesterday's entry was, as always, accurate. A description of my day, my trip to the store, my thoughts of missed opportunities. But at the end, there was something I had never seen before. An entry dated for today, for the future. My heart froze. I was terrified to read it, but I couldn't stop. The handwriting was as even and calm as ever. November 12th. He woke with a heavy feeling. Spent the whole day in anxious anticipation. Couldn't work, couldn't eat. Just sat by the window and watched the gray street. He knows that today it all ends. He knows that this entry is the last one. I read up to that point and my hand started to shake. I looked at the clock. It was almost the same time as noted in the diary. I had indeed spent the entire day by the window paralyzed with fear. With a trembling finger, I traced the next line. It was the last sentence in the diary. The last sentence in the entire chronicle of my life. You are reading these words, and someone is standing behind your window. I didn't want to look. I fought against it, but my body wouldn't obey me. Slowly, as if in a dream, I turned my head toward the dark rectangle of the window. Outside the glass, silhouetted against the night sky, stood a figure. Tall, dark, featureless. I couldn't see a face, but I knew who it was. It was him, the author, my eternal, silent observer. It didn't move. It just stood there watching me. I screamed. For the first time in years, I truly screamed. And in that moment, it slowly raised a hand. Not in a threatening gesture. It simply raised its hand, and in it I saw a pen, the same one that had written all those pages. It took a step. Not toward me, to the side. And it began to write. Directly on the glass of my window, from the outside. The letters appeared on the dark glass glowing with a dim, phosphorescent light. It was the same neat, calligraphic handwriting. It was writing my death. It was describing how I was sitting there paralyzed with terror, how my heart was failing, how I was falling to the floor. And I could feel every word becoming real. The pain in my chest, the cold in my limbs, the darkness clouding my eyes. I was dying, reading about it as it happened, and it stood outside my window calmly, methodically, finishing the final chapter of my life. It was never just an observer. It was the author. And I was only ever its story. Our marriage was dying. We didn't shout at each other, no, it was worse. We were silent. A silence as cold and heavy as a tombstone had settled over our city apartment. To save what was left, we made a desperate decision to start over. We bought an old, secluded house in the country for next to nothing. We thought that working together to restore it would reignite the flame that had gone out. We hoped that a new kind of silence, the silence of nature, would heal the old urban one. The house was beautiful in its neglect. 2 stories, wrapped in ivy, staring at us with dark windows like blind eyes. Inside, it smelled of dampness and the past, but there was another kind of silence in it. Not peaceful, but oppressive, tense, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting. For the first few days, we worked, barely speaking. We stripped old wallpaper, fixed creaking floorboards. One evening, while clearing out old furniture in the study, I found a secret drawer in a desk. Inside lay a diary. I expected to find stories of former residents, but this wasn't a story. It was a numbered list of rules, an instruction manual for the care of the house. The rules were absurd, written in faded ink with a panicked pressure. Number 1, always lock the basement door at sunset. It doesn't matter if you are inside or out. Number 2, if you hear crying at night, do not turn on the light in the hallway. Number 3, never leave the mirrors uncovered after midnight. Number 4, the house does not like loud noises. Arguments and shouts make the walls thinner. And number 5, if something goes missing, do not look for it. It will return on its own, but it will be different. I wanted to show my wife, but she looked so tired and distant, I didn't dare. I put the diary aside, dismissing it as the ravings of a madman. That night, we were exhausted and forgot about everything. The basement door was left ajar, a dark mouth in the corner of the hall. I woke up in the middle of the night. The house was absolutely silent, but I could hear a sound. A quiet, persistent scraping coming from the darkness of the basement, as if someone was slowly dragging their fingernails along the inside of the door. I lay there, paralyzed with fear, until the sound stopped with the first light of dawn. From that day on, I started following the rules, secretly. Every evening, I checked that the basement door was locked, and I covered the old mirror in the hallway with a sheet. My wife didn't notice. She sank deeper into her apathy, and our silence grew louder. Sometimes it would break, short, venomous flashes of arguments over nothing, and I noticed that the house reacted. As soon as our voices rose, icy drafts would appear in rooms with no windows, and a barely perceptible tremor would run through the walls. Rule number 4, the walls become thinner. One night, I woke to the sound of weeping. Quiet, mournful, like a child's, it was coming from the hallway. I remembered the second rule and froze. But my wife had woken up too. She sat up in bed, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. A spark. Not of curiosity, of irritation. She got up and walked to the door. I tried to stop her, grabbed her arm, but she pulled away. She walked into the hallway and flipped the light switch. The bulb flashed and then burst with a loud pop. But in that split second of light, I saw it. At the far end of the dark hallway stood a tall, unnaturally hunched silhouette. It was just standing there, in the dark. We went back to the room and sat in silence until morning. After that night, my wife changed. She stopped arguing. She stopped even looking at me. She just wandered the house silently like a ghost, her apathy becoming almost tangible. A week passed. The relationship was completely broken. One morning, I saw she had packed a bag. She didn't say a word. Her gaze alone said, "I've had enough." I couldn't let her go. Not now, not from this house. A crazy thought flashed in my mind. If we could just spend one night following all the rules perfectly, the house would calm down and everything would be okay. I begged her, not with words, but with my eyes. And to my surprise, she nodded. That evening, we were the perfect tenants. We locked the basement before sunset. We covered every mirror tightly. We didn't say a single word to each other, eating dinner in a complete, dead silence. I could feel the tension in the house recede. The oppressive atmosphere was replaced by an almost peaceful calm. I thought we had succeeded. I woke up in the night from a chill. My wife's side of the bed was empty. I got up quietly and went out of the bedroom. And I saw her. She was standing in the hallway, her back to me. Her shoulders were shaking. She was crying, quietly, silently. I remembered the rule: if you hear crying, but this was my wife. I had to comfort her. I slowly walked up to her. I placed a hand on her shoulder. She stopped crying and turned around very slowly. It was her face, her clothes, her hair, but her eyes, they were completely black with no whites or pupils, and a wide, unnatural smile was slowly spreading across her face. My scream dried in my throat. She brought a finger to her lips. Her voice was a soft, sibilant whisper, and it wasn't hers. "Hush now. You don't want to wake it, do you?" And in that moment I understood everything. The diary was not an instruction manual on how to protect yourself from the house. It was a manual on how to care for what lived inside it, to keep it fed and content. When my wife broke the rules, it didn't punish her. It simply replaced her, creating a perfect, quiet, and obedient copy. I stared into her black eyes, paralyzed with horror, and from behind her, out of the now open basement door, a tall, hunched shadow was slowly rising. I bought this house because I needed to escape, not from people, but from the silence in my apartment that rang with emptiness after my wife left. I thought that working with the earth, with my own hands, something simple and real, could drown out the echoes in my soul. The house was old, and behind it lay an overgrown garden that once must have been beautiful. In an old shed, I found a leather-bound journal. On the cover, a single word was embossed: gardener. Inside were detailed descriptions of plants and strange ritualistic rules for their care. I decided it was a sign and began to restore the garden, using the journal as my guide. "Water the white lily only after sunset," one entry read. "Never cut the red rosebush by the gate. It guards the others." I followed these instructions, and the garden responded with an unnatural speed. Flowers bloomed overnight, their scents becoming incredibly strong, intoxicating. But with this beauty came the strangeness. After I watered the night lily, I had nightmares all night. Dark, disjointed images that left me waking in a cold sweat. I also noticed that the garden was lifeless. No bees, no butterflies, no birds, just perfect, silent plants. Over time, I began to feel that the garden was watching me. Sometimes while working in the flower beds, I would feel a gaze on my back. I'd turn around, nothing, just a dense wall of green. At night, I started to hear a soft rustling under the windows, even on windless nights, as if thousands of leaves were whispering my name. I would draw the curtains tighter, but the feeling of a presence never left. I delved deeper into the journal. It became my only connection to a reality, however strange. I reached the entries about the central tree of the garden, an old yew that looked almost dead. "The yew is the heart. It is not dead. It sleeps. It drinks not water, but dreams. To wake it, you must tell it your darkest secret. Tell it in a whisper, so that none but the tree can hear." I was lonely and broken. The idea of sharing my pain, even with a tree, seemed like a salvation. That night, under a pale moon, I walked to the black trunk of the yew. Feeling like a fool, I leaned in and whispered my greatest fear, a memory from my deepest childhood that I had spent my entire life trying to forget. The next morning, I froze. The old yew was covered in young, emerald green shoots. It was alive. The garden around it seemed even more vibrant. I felt a pang of pride. I had done it. But I myself felt strangely empty. I tried to recall the secret I had told the tree, and I couldn't. My mind was an absolute blank.
as if someone had neatly cut that piece from my memory. Panic seized me. I rushed back to the house, to the journal. I opened it to the final, previously blank page, and I saw text, written in my own trembling handwriting. It was a detailed description of my erased secret. In that moment, I understood everything. The garden was a single living organism that fed not of water but of human memories and fears. The journal was a tool for harvesting. It recorded what the garden took. The gardener wasn't just a worker. He was a victim. And now I had taken his place. I wanted to burn the journal, destroy the garden, run away, but I couldn't. Some unknown force, the will of the garden, held me there. I had become its prisoner. Every night I was irresistibly drawn to the yew, and every night I told it a new story, giving away a piece of myself. I told it of my hopes, my love, my disappointments. And every morning I woke up emptier, while the garden grew lusher. New pages appeared in the journal, written in my hand, but I didn't remember writing them. One night I decided to resist. I locked myself in the house, barricaded the door. It was useless. I could hear the branches of the trees scratching at the walls, the ivy twisting around the windows, trying to get in. The whole garden was in motion. It demanded its food. And then I realized there was only one way out. I found a final, terrifying entry in the journal, one I had skipped over before. The garden is always hungry, but the heart, the you, has the deepest hunger. If you give it your most precious, most powerful memory, it will be sated for a long time. It will sleep again, but the price is great. My most precious memory. It was our wedding day, the only truly happy day of my life. I realized I had to sacrifice it to break free. I ran out of the house and to the yew. Branches whipped at my face, thorns tore at my clothes. I pressed myself against the trunk, and choking on tears, I began to speak. I described every detail, her smile, the white dress, the warmth of her hand in mine. When I finished, the garden fell still. The rustling of the leaves stopped. I felt something inside me break. I looked at my hands. My wedding ring was gone from my finger. It had simply vanished, and I could no longer remember her face, only emptiness. But I was free. I turned and ran without looking back. I ran until I reached the road. I took nothing with me, no money, no documents, only the void inside me. I'm writing this in a roadside diner. I don't know what day it is or where I'm going. I gave the garden my past to buy myself a future. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still feel the touch of its branches on my face and hear the quiet whisper of the leaves. And I know that it's waiting, because even the longest sleep must end. And then the garden will need a new gardener.